There is one crucial difference between good dialogue and bad dialogue, and it has nothing to do with the dialogue itself. While what the characters are saying is obviously very important when it comes to writing good dialogue, the subtext around the dialogue, or I guess underneath the dialogue because it's subtext, is just as important. What often separates a professional sounding dialogue exchange and an amateur one is the presence and execution of the subtext, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you some concrete ways and examples of how you can add subtext to your dialogue. But before we get into specific ways to convey subtext, let's start by defining it. Subtext, at least in the context of dialogue, is any meaning or information not directly conveyed through the dialogue itself. Anything that the reader understands about the conversation that is not directly stated by what is said in the conversation can be considered subtext. Two characters might be having what seems like a pleasant conversation when in actuality they are both avowed enemies and are incredibly angry at each other. One character might be discussing an alliance with another character while they are thinking about betraying that character. One character might be agreeing to subscribe to another character's YouTube channel, but they make no effort to actually hit the button. Subtext is fantastic because it's a great way to show information to the reader. You also get to convey more information for the conversation than you would if you were just relying on the dialogue alone. And also, a lot of what happens in subtext generates conflict, which will help your plot and probably make your novel more interesting. I'm going to go through some methods for delivering subtext. I've sort of ranked these from easiest to pull off to hardest to pull off, but all of these methods are very effective ways to deliver subtext, and they can all be very effective when done well. The first way to convey subtext is via narrative or character thoughts. This is the easiest way to write subtext, but also probably the one that's the easiest to screw up. Basically, you have a character say one thing, but through either their thoughts or the narrative, have something else be conveyed. If they get served a dessert, they can say through dialogue how good the dessert is, but then you can have them think or just have the narrative state that the raisin pudding that they were served wasn't actually that good. This is the most straightforward way to get subtext across. It doesn't leave a lot of room for misinterpretation on the part of the reader, but I think by directly stating it, you lose some of the power of subtext. Effective subtext is discovered by the reader, not stated by the author. And I think when you rely on character thoughts or just the narrative to convey subtext, you lose a little bit of that. You lose a little bit of the power that's naturally inherent when you use other methods. Other methods like body language or action beats. This one is also pretty straightforward. You have the character say something, but strongly imply some other meaning based on what is either physically happening in the scene or how their body language is in comparison to how the conversation is playing out. They might be agreeing with the other character while balling their fists in anger. They might be saying something calm and reassuring while they themselves are on the verge of panic. Oh yes, I feel totally safe even though we just walked into your apartment, which is full of pictures of clowns. Oh, you also have clown dolls, and you're already brushing their hair. This method is better than using thoughts or narrative because you give the reader the opportunity to discover the subtext rather than just being told the nature of the subtext. The next method for delivering subtext is through the double meaning of dialogue. This one is a little weird perhaps to understand, but you can use dialogue itself to convey subtext. The subtext isn't directly stated through the dialogue, but it's strongly implied. So when a character says they need help filling out cell 42 on their T9806 form, that dialogue strongly implies that they are asking for a booty call. At least if you're reading erotic accounting fiction, then it's very strongly implied. That line probably wouldn't work in any other genre. Is erotic accounting fiction a genre? I think that's a genre. I don't want to look because it probably is a genre. Another way to do this is to have something implied through the world building or the setting in your story. And the implications of that sort of get conveyed through the dialogue, even though what's said in the dialogue might be a completely innocuous statement. For instance, in a Joe Abercrombie novel, when someone is offered a loan from Valiant and Balk, you know that that means more than it seems like it means. Wait, with the amount that that bank is mentioned in his books, does Joe Abercrombie write erotic accounting fiction? Anytime you have a character say something, but their meaning is actually different from the literal interpretation of the dialogue, that technically counts as subtext. And the last method that we're going to talk about, and probably one of the hardest ones to pull off, is using negative space to convey subtext. Sometimes it's what you don't say that says the most. Sometimes the most powerful part of dialogue is the dialogue that isn't there. Pause in silence for dramatic effect. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say that out loud. When one character says, I love you, and the other character says, do you want to order pizza? Or they just kind of sit there in awkward silence for 15 minutes. What they say is important, but what's not said and the implications of what's not said are far more important. This is by far the hardest type of subtext to pull off because you have to guide the reader to something by giving them nothing. You have to properly set up the expectations and then kind of violate those expectations and have the reader realize that those expectations were violated. You have to create a hole and then have the reader realize that it is in fact a hole. You can make this a little easier by having a character think or have the narrative state that what they expected to be said wasn't said. But at that point, you're not relying on negative space to convey subtext. You're just moving back to the first method that we talked about, which is using character thoughts or the narrative itself to convey subtext, which is fine. But I don't think it's quite as powerful as having something not be said, the reader realize that it's not being said, and the reader realize that what was not said was incredibly important. Speaking of things that are not going to be said, I'm not going to not say that this video is almost over because we're at the end of it. So there you have it. I would love to see some subtext-filled comments down below. I don't know exactly what that means. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.